Good evening, America, and welcome to your Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you from Washington, D.C. Now, tonight, I'm flying solo as my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, spends some time with family over the holiday week. Now, it's been an unusually busy day in the news for Christmas week, with major developments from the courts all the way to the Congress. And we're going to get to those headlines in a moment, but first, a very special programming note. In a few minutes, we'll be joined live at the top of the show by the 45th President of the United States and the man who hopes to become its 47th President, Donald J. Trump, will be joining us to react to all the big news, including his major win in the courts in Michigan earlier today. So don't go anywhere. President Trump will be right around the corner in a few moments. Now, first, let's get to those headlines. Just hours ago, the House impeachment inquiry formally expanded to the question of whether President Joe Biden corruptly sought to influence or obstruct. That's a direct quote from a letter Congress sent to the White House. They want to know whether he was trying to obstruct Congress by keeping his son, Hunter Biden, from attending a closed-door interview earlier this month. Now, according to the new letter sent to the White House by Oversight Chairman James Comer and Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, the duo have zeroed in on the December 13th press briefing held by White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, where she suggested the president was aware his son was planning to give a press conference rather than attend his transcribed interview in the Capitol on that day. That was, of course, an appearance that was required by a congressional subpoena. Now, that's the latest development in the impeachment inquiry, but it sounded like there's going to be more to come. In other breaking news, the Michigan Supreme Court decided that former President Donald Trump should remain on the state's Republican presidential primary ballot after it declined to take up an appeal to have him disqualified under the 14th Amendment. The ruling leaves Colorado Supreme Court as the lone outlier, trying to disqualify the leading GOP candidate for the ballot. I'm sure we're going to ask President Trump about that. The U.S. Supreme Court, of course, is expected to decide the issue once and for all after the first of the year. In other legal headlines, Special Counsel Jack Smith's team has asked a federal judge to ban the 45th president from introducing evidence at his January 6th criminal trial concerning selective prosecution and any security failures that occurred at the Capitol. Smith suggested such a defense amounted to politics. The filing was notable for another reason. Smith made it sent it to the court, even though the trial judge has suspended the case while upper courts decide some very important constitutional issues. Despite the freeze, Smith decided to weigh in. Well, we'll see where that ends up. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that. Finally, in the entertainment world, some sad news tonight. Comedian Tom Smothers, a part of the iconic and dynamic TV duo known as the Smothers Brothers, passed away today at the age of 86. His brother and show partner, Dick Smothers, made the announcement just a few hours ago. All right, folks, let's turn our attention to our very special first guest. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, I'm honored to welcome tonight the 45th President of the United States and the current frontrunner, and I do mean frontrunner, like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 points for the GOP presidential nomination, Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and thank you, sir, for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, 60 points, but I won't say that. I will never correct you.
You're right. There is a poll that has you up there. That's exactly right. Sir, I want to just start with a little bit of the news of the day. A major victory for you in the Michigan Supreme Court leaves Colorado out there kind of as a lone island. Your reaction to the news today?
Well, it was very expected, I think. It seems to be that we're 33-1. And the one is hopefully going to be overturned by the Supreme Court because nobody can understand why they did that. I guess maybe they did it for publicity. Yeah. Maybe they did it for the very liberal, radical left governor. Maybe they did it for some other reason. I don't know. Nobody really understands it. But it just is an embarrassment all over the world when they see this. I think it's very bad for Colorado, very, very bad for Colorado. But we just had the big win in Michigan today. And that was a good one. And we have 33 wins. And this isn't a loss because we'll have to see what happens. This is not a final determination, as you know.
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court is
most
likely to get involved.
I think it's important. Yeah, it's important for your audience to understand, too, John, that it was 4-3. And this was not like a unanimous. This was a very hotly debated subject. But, 33 other courts have agreed that you just can't do what they did. So. Yeah, that's very good.
A lot of our legal experts tell us the U.S. Supreme Court is going to come down where Michigan and all the other courts did too, sir. I'm pretty sure that's how that will turn out. I want to get to another big development today. Jack Smith says he doesn't want you to be able to introduce evidence in your defense that maybe the January 6th attack was preventable, that police and others had engaged in some security failures, intelligence failures beforehand. Your reaction real quickly to the prosecutor's request today.
No, can you believe this? He's tried to defend Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of D.C., but he's tried to defend Nancy Pelosi who did not do the job. We offered them, as you know, 10,000 troops or National Guard, whatever they wanted, before the event, because I knew it was going to be a very big event. And it wasn't my event. I went and showed up and made a speech.
Right.
We offered 10,000 people and more if necessary. And if they used 500 people, if they used 200 people, January 6th wouldn't have been January 6th. So can you imagine? This guy says, we don't want to introduce that. Well, that's a very big part of it. She was responsible for January 6th because she didn't take the security that we offered her. We offered her 10,000 troops. And, you had far fewer people than that. It was a very small group of people, relatively, compared to the people listening to the speech, which was, by the way, the largest number of people that I've ever spoken before. Nobody ever talks about that, John. They talk about the group that went down and peacefully and patriotically, as I said, as you know. They don't mention that either. That wasn't even brought up in the Unselect Committee. They didn't even use those words. They didn't say that I said the words peacefully and patriotically. This is a very dishonest group of people. And the deranged prosecutor, Jack Smith, he's a deranged human being, unattractive both inside and out. And you look at this guy, he doesn't want me to say that they turned down, and they turned it down in writing, by the way. And what happened is, as you know, the Unselect Committee deleted and threw out everything. They threw everything out, which would be illegal. If you ever did that in a court, a regular court, as a civilian, could you imagine somebody on the right, a Republican or somebody doing it? As you know, they deleted and threw out everything having to do with the hearings. Because a lot of bad things were said about Nancy Pelosi, a lot of bad things were said about a lot of people that they didn't want to get out to the public. So they threw out everything. They deleted everything. There is no information. There's nothing left. Well, it's like crazy. And the reason he doesn't want to do that is because they illegally destroyed everything. They destroyed all evidence. So he wants to do this because of the fact that they destroyed all evidence. They don't have the evidence anymore. And a lot of that evidence was pinpointing that Nancy Pelosi didn't take the troops. Days in advance, I said it. And I said it loud and clear. And they know I said it because I believe it was the mayor wrote a letter back that she doesn't want the troops.
Yeah, it's in writing.
But can you imagine a man saying, we're not allowed to bring the fact up that I offered 10,000 troops for January 6th?
Yeah.
Look, he's got a bad record. He's lost a lot of cases, and he loses them because he goes too far. He's a sick puppy.
Well, it's important to note the Capitol Police Chief, the former Chief Steve Sund, said on this show that January 6th was a preventable event had they gotten the intelligence and the resources that he had asked. You offered them. It just didn't happen. It's just an amazing thing. So I want to turn to...
I offered them. It's true.
There's no doubt. It's in writing. No doubt about it. So I want to turn to October 7th. The October 7th attack on Israel exposed the dirty truth inside our own country, the growth of this anti-Semitism, particularly among our young people here in America's borders. Over the last week, we've seen pro-Hamas and pro-Palestinian protesters block Christmas celebrations in New York, taunt Jewish Americans, even have a congresswoman, AOC, compare the Gazans to Jesus. If elected again to the White House, how might you use the power of the purse to end federal funding or tax exemptions for groups that espouse anti-Semitism or threaten the security of the Jewish people?
Well, number one, I would use that power, and I'd use it very strongly and very powerfully. But you have to remember one thing. This would have never happened if I were president. If that election wasn't rigged, this would have never happened, John. In a million years, it wasn't going to happen. Iran was broke. They didn't have any money to give around. I put sanctions on. I put everything on and told countries, China, many countries, India, France, don't buy oil. If you buy oil, 1 barrel of oil, you buy any oil, we're not going to do business with you, and we're going to put tariffs on all of your products that do get through. We're not going to do business. Anything gets through, we put 100% tariff on. I told them, nobody, very few people were buying, and it was very small amounts. And they were down to almost a trickle. They were down to nothing. They were broke. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. And this would have never happened. It also wouldn't have happened because they knew the consequences would have been much different than what you're seeing right now. So last night, a young soldier was killed, U.S., and the two were very, very badly hurt. And nobody even talks about it. It's not even believable. They have 129 attacks or something like that on our troops in the Middle East. 129 over the last few weeks, and we don't even do anything about it. This president is incompetent. He has no clue, and he's probably a Manchurian candidate. He's probably totally compromised. You know, he accepts money from so many countries, so maybe he accepted money from these countries, so he doesn't want to do anything about it because they know more than any accountant is going to be able to find out. But he is a Manchurian candidate, and how can he allow? So we had a soldier killed last night,
Yep.
2 horrifically wounded, and that's going to be just the beginning of it. It's they don't respect him, and they just are doing whatever they want to do. But now Iran, if you look at it, now Iran has $200 billion that they made on oil, not to mention the $6 billion. As you know, they made $6 billion on the hostage deal, and they also made $10 billion on electricity to Iraq. $10 billion. But that's not even the big number. The big number is what they're making on the oil.
Yeah.
Because all of these countries that weren't buying when I was president, they wouldn't have bought. There's no way they would have bought. And they were literally down to being broke. They were broke. They had no money. In fact, there were a lot of big stories around that time, 3-4 years ago, that these groups, these terror groups, were breaking up because there was no money coming out of Iran.
Yeah, no,
Wouldn't have happened.
It's an extraordinary thing to watch. There's a general named Soleimani, I think, that knows you meant business. Certainly learned that the hard way. I want to turn to another organization. When you were president, you forced major changes to NATO. You put it on much better financial footing. You got people to pay their fair share. There's another international body that's gaining much negative attention right now, the United Nations. It has repeatedly espoused anti-Israel rhetoric, and it failed to formally condemn the Hamas attack. It's almost unbelievable. A lot of people can't believe that. If reelected, are you considering any reforms or funding changes to the United Nations?
So, 2 things. First of all, with NATO, when I went in there were only 8 countries.
Yeah.
At the time, there were 28 countries. There were only 8 countries that were paid up.
Yeah.
And Poland was one of them. Poland was great. But, you know, usually the closer you were to Russia, the more likely you were to be paid up. But there were 8 out of the 28 that were paid up, and we were paying a disproportionate share. We were paying, I would say, 80, 90, you could even say almost 100% of everybody else. So they take advantage of us on trade. This is the European countries. Right. You add them up, and they're similar size to the United States. So think of this. They take advantage of us on trade. They're very, very bad to us, very hard on trade. So they take advantage, and yet we defend them for practically, like, I mean, for what? We defend them for, they should be defending themselves. Now, with Ukraine, while you're on the subject, why is it that we're in for $200 billion and they're in for probably $20 billion? That's probably the number. And it was the same thing when I got there. NATO we were in for massive amounts of money, and they were like Germany, spent very little money. They were spending less than 50%, less than half of what they were supposed to be spending. Other countries, likewise, they weren't paid up. And I said, if you don't pay up, then we're not going to defend you. And once they believed that, which they did after a short period of time, hundreds of billions of dollars came pouring into NATO. It was amazing. It was a beautiful thing to see. And Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, is a good man. I wonder if he feels the same way. But about what I'm going to say, he said, President Trump was amazing. All of these presidents came, they made a speech, and they left. He came, he told them you have to pay up, and they all paid. And hundreds of billions of dollars now came in. So, I mean, it's just an amazing, it's a beautiful thing to see. Now, if you take a look, in so many other ways, that's what's happening. Why isn't, John, why aren't these countries going dollar for dollar with us? Right. Obviously, it's got to be more important. They're right there. We're not. We have an ocean separating us. Why is it that they're in for a tiny fraction of what we are in terms of payment to, it's in terms of payment, right, with regard to Ukraine. So we're in for perhaps $200 billion. It could be more. Nobody really even knows the number. And they're in for a tiny fraction of that. Very unfair. I say they have to equalize. And if they don't equalize, the United States cannot keep doing this. The United States owes $36 trillion. They can't keep doing this.
Yeah, no, the debt is extraordinary. Sir, I want to turn to the campaign. You're just a couple of weeks from the first votes being cast in Iowa at the caucuses. You have a commanding lead. The press is bored because you're so far in the lead. They were suggesting you might be considering Nikki Haley as a vice president. I want you to answer that. What are you considering her? And second of all, what you want the American people to know about her record on the border, on taxes, on spending, and on entitlements?
Well, Nikki, I know very well, and I actually got along with her very well, and
Right.
she wasn't going to run. She said I was a great president, and she would not run as long as I ran, and, that's famous. That's documented with her statements. It's on about 15 tapes and, broadcast all over the place. And then one day she decided to run. So, I thought that was somewhat disloyal. Not nearly as disloyal as Ron DeSanctimonious, who I got elected. And then he, ran. So that was, and he's crashed and burned. And, she's way behind. She's like 50, 60 points behind me. But if she goes up 1 point, they say she surges. In the last poll, I went up 7 points to almost 70, and which is hard because I have very little points to go up. They've been used, right? They've been taken already. But I went up 7 points. She went up 3 points, and he went down a couple of points. But because she went up 3 points and he went down, they said she surged, that Nikki Haley surged. But she didn't surge against me. She surged against Ron. But the point is that, look, I know her very well. I actually got along with her very well. As you know, she left at a nice ceremony at the White House, the Oval Office. It was very nice.
Right.
She said terrific things about me. She said he's a great president. And then she decided out of nowhere to run. So I was a little bit surprised at that, but that's a politician. No, I'm not considering anybody at this time, Jen. Look, I want to win. And one thing I will say, and I've watched this for a long time, the vice president has virtually no impact. You could go back all throughout history. Whoever the choice of vice president is has virtually no impact as to who is going to get a nomination or get elected. It's an amazing thing, actually. Surprising.
Yeah. So for you, the most important thing is someone that could take the reins and do it, but it doesn't really affect the electoral outcome for you in your mind, right?
The most important thing is who would do a good job, because it has to be. But just, it's very interesting when you study it. People are picked, and everyone's talking about who's the vice president. But in terms of election, in terms of nomination, the vice presidential pick has very, very little influence over the vote. Amazingly, surprisingly, actually.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. When you look at the electoral thing, there's no doubt about it. Sir, I want to go back to Israel for just a second. You achieved the Abraham Accords, which are one of the greatest achievements in the Middle East history. You then put together a peace plan for Israel and Palestine that people, even today, 3 years later, still refer to regularly. At some point, Hamas is going to be eradicated from Gaza. What is your best ideas for trying to get peace and prosperity inside Palestine, particularly because so many Palestinians have been conditioned for decades to hate Israel? What are the keys to prosperity in Gaza that you're thinking about right now?
Well, they do hate Israel, and Israel hates them. And if you look at even when they're growing up, and the Palestinians are growing up, and their children are being educated, they read books like the old days with Run, Spot, Run. They have hatred in these books, hatred of Jewish people. It's a terrible thing, and frankly, it's makes it very hard. I always felt I could get a deal. I think I would have had a deal. This would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. It could not have happened. I think I could have had a deal. Now it's much harder to have a deal, actually, and it's a deal that the hatred has only gotten worse. By allowing this to happen, and Biden allowed it to happen. Look, Biden is trying to play both sides, and he's failing, I think, unless people are stupid. He's failing because what he did is took all the sanctions off Iran, and Iran's gained hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth. And you don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, and they're 30 days from getting one. They say 31, 32 days away from having nuclear capability. You don't want, when I terminated the nuclear deal, that was a great thing. The problem was the administration did nothing with the termination. I would have had a deal with Iran within 2 weeks after the election, had the election been different, had the outcome been different. I would have had a deal with Iran within 2 weeks after that election. We would have had a deal because they were needing a deal. They had no money. They couldn't fund themselves, let alone terror. We would have had a deal. But now they're rich again. They're really rich again, and they're selling oil to China as their number one customer, millions and millions of barrels of oil, and they were selling almost nothing with me. And Iran was allowed to get rich because Joe Biden allowed them to. So he can say whatever he wants, but he's the reason for this. He's an incompetent president. He's a compromised president, totally compromised. But he allowed them to get rich. Now they're rich, and it's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to have. But worse than being rich because of the money, because of what they have, they will have within a short period of time nuclear weapons. And that is never something that can be allowed to happen.
And you were fighting to make sure it would never happen. Sir, last question, because I know you're on a tight time schedule. Joe Biden paints any American who calls himself a patriot or wants to join you in making America great again as extremists. But I've noticed something recently on your event. So you're zeroing in on Democrats' extreme positions when it comes to things like abortion up to birth, freeing violent offenders from prison, keeping the border insecure, and allowing biological men in women's locker rooms. If you win the nomination, do you plan to flip the script and make extremism a Democrat liability?
It is a liability. They are extreme. Look, what's more extreme? I just looked at pictures, and I've just looked at a report. Millions of people, not thousands, millions of people are pouring into our country, numbers that are much bigger than being reported by the fake news. And you see it. I mean, when you look at those groups of people, they were saying 4,000 or 5,000 people coming up. But if you look, it looks bigger than a Trump rally of 30,000 people. I've never seen it. They are pouring up from all over the world. You know, it's not just El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, etc. They're pouring up from all over the world. They're coming from Africa. They're coming from the Congo.
Right.
The Congo has sending a lot of people. They're coming from Asia. They're coming from all over the world. A lot of people coming, interestingly, from China, and they're all young, and they're all male. They're between 20 and 25 years old. It sounds like an army to me. Yeah. But a lot of people from China, a lot of people from Russia, but a lot of people from Africa and just Asia generally. They're pouring in. They're destroying the country. They're destroying our country. There is absolutely no control. There's no check. Many of these people are sick. Many of them come from prisons. They're very sick. Many of them are very sick. It's a horrible thing because I have a bigger heart than anybody. But Americans are going to get sick. These are diseases that are easily catchable by people, and it's a terrible thing. But they're also coming from prisons and jails. They're being emptied out. Mental institutions, I always say mental institutions, and a step above that are the insane asylums where you have some very sick people. They're being emptied out into our country, and as you know, many terrorists are coming into our country. These people are either evil that are running our country. There's something wrong with them. This is not like, oh, gee, you know, look, a lot of times I'll be conservative, or I call myself more common sense than anything else, but I'll be common sense and they want to do so. But I can understand why, you know, I can understand the other side. There is no understanding why millions of people from jails, from everywhere, from parts unknown, actually, from countries, people never even heard of some of these countries. There is no understanding why millions and millions of people are allowed to freely walk into our country. And the crime is the crime that they're causing and the problems they're causing. You know, nobody's telling you about their stays in hotels.
Right.
They're taking over hotels, top hotels, being paid for by the United States while our vets are sleeping on streets. But they're taking over top hotels. The fights that are taking place in the hotels, the destruction, the beating up of the employees, nobody wants to tell you about that. Yeah. These are rough people that are going into those hotels. The Biden administration, I believe he's the worst. I don't believe. There's not even a question about it. He's the worst president in the history of our country. And by the way, he's weaponized justice. I've got 4 indictments that are bullshit indictments. He's weaponized justice. This was never supposed to happen in our country. And what he's done in terms of using the DOJ and the FBI to attack his political opponent, nobody has ever seen a thing like this happen other than in a banana republic.
Well, sir, I'm certain of one thing. The American people remember a time when the border was secure, when Iran was behaving and drained of its finances. It's a time that they're not going to soon forget. It's a great honor to have you on. I want to wish you and the First Lady a happy New Year early, and thank you for joining us, sir. What a great honor.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you,
sir. God bless you. All right, folks, what an interview. Wow, a lot to unpack there. We're going to get that in a few seconds, but we got to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, America. Anti-Semitism has been integrated and taught to young children for decades now, and it's becoming more apparent in recent days. Why? The polling data shows that a Harvard-Harris poll from this month found a remarkable 67% of people aged 18 to 24, so they just got out of school in most cases or finishing up their college, believe that Jews as a class are oppressors and should be treated as oppressors. Ryan Walters serves as the great state of Oklahoma's superintendent of public instruction. He's taking this on front and center. He's not letting anti-Semitism fester any longer, and he's also fighting where it began with the DEI movement on the left. Joining us right now is the superintendent. Sir, great to have you. Merry Christmas. Thank you for joining us.
Merry Christmas. Thank you for having me. And yes, sir, in Oklahoma, we are going to fight back against this anti-Semitism and take it out root and branch. And that means getting rid of these, what they should be called is divide, exclude, and indoctrinate. These DEI programs have been embedded in higher ed for decades, and what they have done is fester anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism, and we're going to put an end to it here in Oklahoma, and we've got to do this as a country in order to make America great again.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And I got to tell you, sir, it's only been 40, 50 years, maybe 60 years now from the great civil rights movement. And we spent so much effort and energy and political capital trying to get people away from the idea that skin color changes your outcome in America. We wanted to be colorblind, but now we have an entire education bureaucracy that's trying to reinforce the idea that your skin color, your religious beliefs are determining whether you're an oppressor or the oppressed, and you've got no choice about it. How damning is it for a country that went through the civil rights movement to have it flipped on its head again?
It's going to destroy this country. I mean, what they're doing, it's amazing to see the nomenclature they use because it's so wrong. They call themselves progressives, and what they're trying to do is take us back to a time where individuals are labeled by their skin color. They're trying to take us back to a time of collective Marxist views, that people aren't individuals, they're not viewed that way, they're viewed as the collective, and then pitting those collective groups against one another. What we're doing is we're teaching young people to hate each other. We're teaching them to hate themselves. We're teaching them to hate the country. And so what we're continue to see is you see this disrest around the country. It's not an accident. What we have seen is they have pushed this radical in higher ed with the most radical Marxists in the country who masquerade as college professors. And we have got to start, number one, defunding these institutions if they are going to go down this road of anti-Semitism. Number two, we've got to end tenure for any college professor that promotes DEI or promotes any kind of anti-Semitism. And we have got to get back to a place where we're actually, you can't make the country great again if you don't understand what made the country great in the first place. So we've got to get back to an education system that teaches our kids what the core principles are of America and make sure that they understand that that is the bar that we hold ourselves to as a country. And we've got to get back in line and get President Trump in the White House and move forward with this agenda.
Yeah, it's so remarkable. We just had President Trump on and talking about these very issues. I want to turn to the link between DEI, which is this indoctrination sort of education curriculum that's been in there, and how it leads to anti-Semitism. But before we do that, how did DEI get injected into public schools? I mean, you're taking it out now, but how did it get in the back door?
Right. Well, it started in higher ed. So you first had these radical Marxist professors in higher ed that started creating anti-American curriculum under the guise of DEI. And so what they do is the inclusion aspect of it is to include the most radical elements of society and push it as mainstream. Transgenderism, that is something they actually are pushing in our K-12 schools today. And you see it started there in higher ed. And what you continue to see is critical race theory has manifested itself through DEI programs. You've continued to see the belief that there's certain victim groups and everyone else is oppressor. So this is right out of Karl Marx's playbook. But you start it in higher ed, you train teachers in these programs, you make all the administrators come through these programs. Higher ed largely in states dictates what the curriculum will be, what the training will be for your teachers and administrators. And then what do you know? K-12 starts to mirror these DEI Marxist programs that we've seen in higher ed.
Yeah, that's remarkable how it evolved. And right under our noses, I think we're just so busy. A lot of parents didn't know that it was just seeping in so quickly. Talk a little bit about Oklahoma. Oklahoma's leading on this. You are stamping out DEI in schools, and by so doing, you're taking it directly to anti-Semitism, CRT, all these other indoctrinations. What was the key to Oklahoma's first few strikes against this?
Right. And so we are laying out the playbook to how to get education back on track here in Oklahoma for other states to follow. And here's the blueprint. First of all, you do a deep dive into what's going on in our schools. And we found in the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that this is indoctrination. We found it in Tulsa public schools. We found it in our higher ed systems. So we came in and we said, listen, no more diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. We know what these are. These are fronts to push propaganda. Frankly, now we see what they've done is they have the oppressor groups and the victim groups, and they've labeled Jews oppressors. So you can say anything you want about Jews. You can target them. You can call for their extermination. And under these type of programs, that's protected. Hey, you can say anything about them you want. They are what we label an oppressor group. And you see how nasty and divisive these are. So we have eliminated those programs. No taxpayer dollars will go to fund indoctrination. And this is where you start, but here's where you end up. We are also promoting Prager University in our schools. We want PragerU in our schools. We want to continue to get back to an education system that reflects the values of this country and our society and our families. That starts with teaching what is good. It starts teaching what our principles are. And it helps our young people understand America is great because of our values, our Judeo-Christian values. We've got to get back to teaching that and getting our kids back on the trajectory to turn around what Joe Biden has done and make this country great again and get us back on the right track.
Yeah, such a simple solution, but so many states are struggling to find it. Clearly, Oklahoma leading the way and shining the light. Now, with this effort that you've taken on and the governor's taken on, the legislature's taken on, there is a counteroffensive. Democrats trying to impeach you, Congress trying to, the legislature trying to get all of your records. Why such a blowback to something that most parents would say, I like what our superintendent is doing?
This is showing everyone out there why these things haven't happened in your state. Because guess what happens when I began to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs? We have Democrats that are trying to impeach me. Well, hey, we're in a red state, so what difference does that make, right? Well, what they've done is they've bought off a Republican in the legislature here, the teachers union has, who continues to try to pressure me and vilify me, attacking me constantly, attacking parents, attacking conservatives. And so what we continue to see is this teachers union dumps millions of dollars into attacks against me and parents, and we're not going to back down. We're going to continue to fight for parents. And this is the belief of most parents, most Americans, is we want to get back to a time where we actually learn reading, math, science, and history in our schools, not transgenderism, anti-Semitism, and hate for one another. So what we are going to continue to do is we're going to continue to fight that. But let's be really clear. It doesn't matter how red your state is. The teachers union has tremendous influence with the amount of money that they push, and they will buy off Democrats and Republicans alike to keep their power apparatus in place. And we will never back down here in Oklahoma. And I know parents will never back down. But folks, we got to get back our education system. You have to fight. Every state in the country has to fight back against these Marxist teachers unions.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. And every person who's come on the show in the last couple of weeks talking about this said that the teachers unions are ground zero of this fight on the other side against parents. We got about 2 minutes left. I want to ask a little bit about an idea that Alan Dershowitz, who's been an educator for 60 years at Harvard Law School, what he said he thinks is needed. This is funny because he's a faculty member. He thinks there needs to be a surveillance system that polices and keeps an eye on what's being taught in college classrooms all the way down through K through 12. Get it out to each parent so that they can decide whether that's what they want their children to see. And then those who abuse their position and turn from trying to teach to trying to indoctrinate, there can be a disciplinary process. Do you think there is a will in this country to maybe create such a surveillance system right now?
Look, I think more transparency in higher ed is a good thing. And I also think we've got to make sure that we have consequences for these individuals that are continuing to push Marxism with taxpayer dollars. We got to fire these professors. We've got to fire these presidents. We don't need any more tenure in higher ed. I'm sorry. That shouldn't exist any longer. They have broken the public trust. It is time to fire these professors that have undermined our country by pushing this radical anti-American hate in our colleges. And again, we're doing this in K-12 here in Oklahoma. We've sat here and, hey, if you're a teacher and you push critical race theory, we're going to take your teaching certificate. You're not going to teach anymore. We are going to root out this Marxism, and we've got to start in higher ed. Higher ed is where so many of these problems came from. Your viewers are going to remember Common Core, critical race theory, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The push all came from the Department of Education federally, and it was instituted through these higher ed institutions, which pushes it in K-12 and then all around society. We have to eliminate the Federal Department of Education. We have got to fire all of these Marxist professors, and we have got to get our higher ed institutions back to actually helping the country be great again, rather than undermining it and turning us into a Marxist dumpster fire.
It's such a simple program, but it is so profoundly impactful. Transparency and accountability with a little bit of common sense mixed in. That's why so many parents are cheering for the great work you're doing, Mr. Superintendent. Want to wish you a happy holidays. Thank you for joining us. What a great conversation. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, America. We're going to stay on the issue of border security. It's on every American's mind. Just before Christmas, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs, a Democrat, ordered her state's National Guard to the southern border, acknowledged that the border had become unmanageable, and said, "I'm sending the bill to Joe Biden." Well, that's great, except that the governor had spent most of her first year of her term, actually undoing security provisions. Our next guest on the front lines and on the right side of border security, State Senator Justine Watsack, is an Arizona State Senator. She has been on the front lines pushing legislation to get the situation right, at least in Arizona. She joins us right now. Senator, great to have you on the show. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for having me.
It's a great honor to have you. I saw you at Charlie Kirk's AmFest last week. I think you were one of the rock stars there. This issue of border security in Arizona, it really resonates even with very young people who are just becoming part of their adult life, right?
Yes, 100%. And we have a lot of young Republicans that are starting to come up in the ranks, taking all interest from 13 years and up. So it's very exciting to see the interest from our youth.
Yeah, it really was. It was an amazing festival and some really great footage and great conversations going there. I want to turn to your governor, Katie Hobbs, big Democrat, big liberal. Until a few weeks ago, she seemed to be on board with Joe Biden's border policies. She was giving money to DACA recipients, rewarding them for coming into the country. She was pulling and shutting down border enforcement units. All of a sudden, some sort of epiphany. What happened with Katie Hobbs?
Well, I first want to start by saying that I represent Pima County, which is truly the front lines. That's Tucson, Arizona, and the surrounding cities. And my voters have expected me to defend the border and to have some sort of a plan in place, because we are being absolutely overrun by the homeless, the illegal immigrants, and the mentally ill, the homelessness that's come from this crime. So businesses are starting to pull out of Tucson, and it's very concerning to me because once we start losing some of our big anchor businesses and the money, there's not going to be a whole lot left for Tucson. And so it's a real travesty. But with the Republicans still in control of the legislature, we're working on all these problems, finding solutions. And unfortunately, the governor just goes and vetoes all of our efforts. And I just don't take her seriously at this point. I think what she needs to do is step down and let somebody else occupy the ninth floor while Arizona's Republicans lead the legislature and we actually tackle these issues.
It is remarkable. And to even think that people would flee Tucson, one of the most beautiful and vibrant cities in all of America, but that's how bad it's gotten in such a short time. It's just jaw-dropping. You have a lot of great common sense ideas that you and your colleagues have been working on in the Senate. And I want to get to a legal issue in a second with the Senate. But before we get to that, tell us some of the solutions that you've put on the front table with your legislation and with your great work.
Well, Hobbs, of course, remember, her first act as governor was to tear down the barriers that were put in place by the previous governor. And that showed everybody right there and then that she wants an open border. But she has not been communicating with the legislature. She has not been telling us what her strategy is, much less for the National Guard, because honestly, I don't think she has a strategy. And then I met with some sheriffs, and the sheriffs were telling me about the trafficking that was taking place at the border with the use of phone apps, electronic devices, and the cartel was behind those apps. And what it did was it allowed people to make $2,000 for every single illegal immigrant that was coming across. And they would put them in there. You had soccer moms that were putting 5, 6 illegal migrants in the back of their SUV, and that was paying for their SUV. They were paying off their car with what they were doing. It's illegal. So I came up with a bill very organically, just in talking with the sheriffs and the needs of the people, to make it a felony if anybody uses that app to traffic people from the border into our country. And Katie Hobbs vetoed it, of course.
Of course. Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. And by the way, when we talk about human trafficking, it isn't just the event of coming across the border. Along that journey, and it's so funny because Democrats say, well, we're trying to be sympathetic to illegal immigrants. This is the most inhumane way to come to the United States that anyone could imagine, right? Women get raped, men and children are put into indentured servitude. All their money is taken. Tell us some of the things that you've heard from illegal immigrants on their journey to Arizona, because it has to be horrific.
Well, it is. And if you've been to the border, you'll see that in the desert, they have what they call rape trees.
Right.
They put the clothing of the women on the tree, almost like a prized possession or some sort of trophy that they've accomplished that awful fact. And then on top of that, you have all the just disgusting garbage that's left behind. And I don't understand how we have so many environmentalists out there that are saying we need to clean up our environment, yet they're okay with having these people come across into our country and just, completely trash our side of the border and trash America's deserts. So it's becoming a real health safety issue as well. We have the same issue when they come into our cities. They're living on our streets. They're, urinating and defecating on our streets. They're walking right into people's homes. They are the crime is just unbelievable. And then I don't know if you've seen some of the footage of how they just are. They're all throughout our airports, and they're being trafficked through the airports from Homeland Security, getting to go wherever they want in the country. It's a free ride. They just get a ticket, and if they want to go to Philadelphia, they go to Philadelphia. If they want to go to Florida, they get to go to Florida. And all of this is free travel, and it's something that most people can't understand. We can't wrap our head around it. Like, where are these people going? How are they thriving? There's no jobs for them. There's no jobs for Americans in a lot of places. How are they thriving without being paid by taxpayer dollars? They're walking around with $2,500 crisp $100 bills in their hands. We don't get that. Yeah. They're getting free health care out of our hospitals. We don't get that. They're in our children's schools. They're everywhere now, and it's become a travesty. This is very much an invasion.
Yeah, no, it really is a term, invasion. It's a term that now I hear everyday Americans actually use. It used to be taboo. Oh, it's not really an invasion. It's an invasion. People know it and they feel it and they've experienced it. I want to spend the last minute and a half talking about another issue, because Katie Hobbs has bypassed the traditional advise and consent power of the state Senate that we have it here in the United States, but trying to get her nominees to have to not go through confirmation process. Your Senate is suing to try to go back to the system that our founding fathers wanted, right?
Yes, that is correct. And I'm very blessed to be a part of this Senate. We've stepped outside of the norm. If you look at some of our previous legislators, we use the rules. We use what is there and provided to us with the Constitution and with the rules of the legislature to fight back. And I don't think people understand just how hard it is to be in a divided government, to have the Republican majority but have a Democrat AG and governor. It definitely makes for us feeling like we beat our head against the wall an awful lot. But we do have many wins, and we have to be able to utilize the courts. We need to use the courts to fight this, and I do believe that we will prevail, because the Constitution is still the law of the land.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. The lawfare strategy that the Arizona Senate Republicans have pursued is beginning to have an impact. Same with Texas, with Ken Paxton and Governor Abbott. We're starting to see the border states fighting for all of us downstream from you. It's a lot worse where you are, but I know there are constituents here far from you that know you're fighting for them as well. State Senator, it's a great honor to have you on. Thank you for joining us. Have a great holiday.
Thank you as well.
Yeah,
Have
what
a great one.
Thank you. All right, folks, what a great interview. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we got a little bit more conversation before we wrap up for the day. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back, America. Before we go into the sunset tonight, I want to bring in one of our great legal exits. Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project, has been in the Senate for a long time. He saw how things are done. He monitors the court so carefully. And with all the news occurring today, both on the impeachment front and in the Michigan Supreme Court, we thought it'd be a good job to bring him in from Colorado. He's joining us by phone right now. Mike, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Good to have you on, sir.
Merry Christmas, and thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great honor. You always make sense of very complex issues. I don't think this 14th Amendment, though, it seems that complex. Michigan Supreme Court falls in line with about 24 other courts, says, Trump gets to stay on the ballot. There's no reason to disqualify him. Your reaction, and what does it do to isolate Colorado even further?
Well, this Colorado ruling 8 days ago was an abomination. You had 4 left-wing justices on the Colorado Supreme Court for the first time in American history dust off a 155-year-old provision in the 14th Amendment passed after the Civil War to disqualify Confederates who engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States, to make sure that they couldn't hold office. These 4 Democrat operatives on the Colorado Supreme Court used that to kick Trump off the Republican primary ballot in Colorado, and it is truly an outlier. We have Arizona, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and now Michigan all rejecting this. This Colorado Supreme Court ruling needs to be reversed by the Supreme Court of the United States immediately.
Yeah, it sounds like it's heading in that direction pretty quickly. And, of course, President Trump on the show just a few minutes ago said exactly that, which is Colorado's an outlier. Hope they wake up soon and realize they're on the wrong side of this. It'll be interesting to see. I want to get to something else President Trump talked about. He reacted to Jack Smith's filing today about trying to keep President Trump from using reasonable evidence like, hey, the January 6th attack might have been preventable if security failures hadn't occurred, if intelligence failures occur. It seemed to me most Americans would say that is something that a defendant should be allowed to introduce in court. Jack Smith wants to keep it up. Your reaction to what Jack Smith did today?
Well, it just shows you how partisan Jack Smith is and what a buffoon he is, frankly. I mean, he just got unanimously rejected again by the Supreme Court when he tried to go straight to the Supreme Court to fast-track this criminal trial to interfere in the election. Remember, he had his criminal conviction of former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell unanimously reversed by the Supreme Court back in 2016. That is very hard to do, but Jack Smith found a way. But what I think is going to happen here is this D.C. Obama judge, Tanya Chutkan, who is going to rubber stamp whatever this Biden special counsel Jack Smith wants. They're trying to say that Trump caused the January 6th riot, and when he wants to put up a defense saying, no, I didn't cause it, this was the cause, they're saying he can't do that. That's not constitutional. He has the right to confront witnesses. He has the right to due process.
Yeah, that's exactly what a lot of people say. There's another oddity because Jack Smith, this case has been put on hold by the judge, by the appellate courts there, and he still filed something in the middle of this. Is that a little odd to see a prosecutor file something when the case is kind of on ice for a little bit?
Well, like I said, Jack Smith is used to getting reversed unanimously by the Supreme Court. I don't think he cares that he looks like a total buffoon. His sole mission is he is a Scud missile sent by Biden to take out Trump for November 5th, 2024.
Yeah, it was a very odd moment seeing that filing in there. Mike, we only got less than a minute. I just want to ask real quickly. Today, Comer and Jordan announced that they're expanding the inquiry to obstruction because of the comments that Karine Jean-Pierre made that Joe Biden kind of knew what his son was going to do when he went up to the press conference, didn't show up for his deposition as subpoenaed. Your reaction to that expansion, warranted?
Well, absolutely. Remember, they're throwing Trump's top aides in prison for raising executive privilege and saying that they have obstructed a congressional investigation. They have Peter Navarro heading to jail and Steve Bannon heading to jail. It's just outrageous what they've done there. But look, if you have President Biden working with his son to obstruct a congressional investigation, that is certainly impeachable.
Yeah, that's one of the things we love about you, Mike. You get right to the bottom line. It's clear and easy to understand. What a great honor to have you on today. Thanks for taking some time for the holidays to join us, and have a happy new year, my friend.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to have to leave things there. Wow, what an incredible night. So thankful to President Trump for giving us that great interview. Amanda Head, my amazing host, she'll be back tomorrow night in the chair. Until then, we're going to head off.